Hello again, and welcome back to the Gaming News Canada show. I'm your host, Steve McAllister. 2+ weeks ago, your humble host moderated a couple of panels during the Osgoode Hall of Gambling Law Certificate program created by Don Bourgeois and Harley Redlick. One of the panels, a discussion on what works and what needs tweaking with regards to regulated gaming in Canada, included the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Canadian Gaming Association, Paul Burns. Paul appeared on that panel via Zoom as he was attending the Council of Europe workshop on the Macklin Convention in Gatineau, Quebec. Because we wanted to get his thoughts on that workshop, along with some other topics, and because we haven't had him on the podcast since the middle of January, we welcome back Mr. Burns. Geez, Paul, I was doing some research for this episode today, and I didn't realize it was that long since you last appeared on the show.
Time flies when we're having fun, isn't it? Getting all that stuff going on. Nice to be back and join you.
Yes, well, thank you. Thank you for the time as always.
Happy to do it.
Hey, this will probably be a bit of a rapid round, although I don't know if that ever happens when you and I get into these conversations. Some issues run a little bit longer than others. We're going to try our best here. I did want to talk to you about the workshop because it was something that flew under the radar a bit. Tom Nightingale covered it on Canadian Gaming Business last week, and Dave Briggs used Tom's report to do a piece in the Gaming News Canada newsletter last week. I guess for you, maybe you can just tee up the workshop a little bit, and from the Canadian Gaming Association's perspective, what were the highlights of this workshop in Gatineau?
Yeah, it was the Council of Europe has basically a Macklin Convention Secretariat that oversees. There's a working group that monitors and works with nations that are trying to become full signatories to the convention. And it's on match manipulation, match fixing, and creating national integrity networks that share information to prevent match fixing, to also potentially investigate and sort out where, if in fact match fixing is occurring, if there are alerts or tips that come. And really designed initially to protect athletes first and foremost, from national sports bodies, and in each nation has created a little different model for themselves, between professional amateur sports bodies, law enforcement, gaming regulators, gaming industry, all sitting around being able to share information around around betting integrity. And so this was the first time the council's ever done anything in North America at all. And so there was a collection of folks from Canada, the US, in the space to talk about and learn from some of the experiences of other countries, some of updates on what is match fixing is occurring in different parts, a lot of it in the unregulated marketplaces in far Eastern Europe, Russia, Asia, other places like that, where there's some very elaborate operations really working and creating either fake product or really stuff I wouldn't consider sport that people are putting up for betting. So it was informative, and it was a great exchange because, for myself, the Canadian Centre for Ethics in Sport is Canada's national body that works to protect they were created out of the doping scandal, obviously from the Olympics many years ago. They monitor Canadian athletes under their WADA requirements. They are now mandated on the new Safe Sport requirements from Sport Canada, the government of Canada, and they have taken on the issue of betting integrity and creating their own policy that they've shared with sports bodies in Canada to create betting integrity policies amongst the athlete groups. And so I began working with them in 2018. Their first symposium on this issue was in 2019. And they've been a singular voice probably with the support of the Canadian Olympic Committee in Canada, because Sport Canada, the ministry, has really had an issue. Hasn't been terribly interested in this issue. They've had other priorities with sport, safe sport, but the fact is that this is something the CCS has really embraced, and it brought many parties together over the years with their symposiums. And so this was a broader chance of with the lottery corporations involved. World Lottery is a big supporter of the Macklin Secretariat, as is WIS, which is the lottery's world monitoring system. And obviously there's others like the IBIA, International Betting Integrity Association, do monitoring for a lot of the operators in Ontario, for integrity monitoring. And so this was a chance for really a dialogue and share and educate. And so for us, it was great because you learned from the Danish regulator was there, very similar model to Ontario, sharing their experiences on integrity. But also the AGCO, Dave Phillips and Doug Hood have done a lot of work in this space, because Ontario's model is really hung out there as one of the better ones in the world around integrity monitoring, around its regulatory standards. And so it was great to have, there were sports bodies. Hockey Canada was there, the Canadian Coaching Association, who were there to learn and understand. And so it was a great just exchange of information and learning is really what it was designed to do and bring awareness. And so, we've always wanted Canada becoming a signatory to the Caledon Convention was noted as an observation on the Senate bill.
Right.
When C218 passed, it said that was an add-on that Canada should take the steps, because one of the first steps is actually creating regulated markets. Because when you're watching, then you know what's going on. If there's no one overseeing a market, it's hard to find anything if no one's watching. And that's what really the first principle is, creating regulated markets. We've said, and I, even in the Senate hearings last fall on the advertising bill of Senator Deakins, it was said, if you really want to do something more productive, the federal government has a role here. And maybe you'd like to take steps to get the government to become a signatory to the Caledon Convention versus trying to wade into provincial jurisdiction and regulate gaming advertising. And so I'm pretty clear that the priority of the government should be around the Caledon Convention, protecting athletes, because it also looks at asking you to evaluate our laws. So do we need a specific law on match fixing? There was a Supreme Court case in 2015, the Riseborough case is referred to, that was upheld and proved out of using sections of the code under fraud for match fixing. But before that, no one thought we really had any measurable laws. And I was even quoted as saying that many times, because until 2015, we really didn't have any case law. But is that enough? Do we need specific laws to say that the intent to fix a match, or for protection of athletes, so there's a whistleblower protection for athletes who want to call out and say, hey, listen, I've been approached, or I've been co-opted and I want out of this mess that I'm in, because often it involves, coercion and threats and other things to get athletes to do these things in many cases. So, those are the kinds of things we need to evaluate. And so it was a great way of picking up a national conversation. We've had, the AGCO has sort of led the charge. They were the only regulator in North America requiring, went after the UFC to say, hey, you need to improve your policies. And they've done steps in other sports, and we're off on a really good foot. And so it's now, how do we build upon that? And that's what this was really about, a conversation. I appreciate the opportunity to spend some time with the people from the Secretariat, and for all of us that were in the room that have been talking on and off over the years, it was occasion to say, hey, we should just talk more on these issues. And because there's great stuff done. The IBIA, in partnership with FanDuel, Betway, and Bet365, at the last symposium of the CCS, offered up a commitment of funding of $300,000 to provide free training to athlete organizations in Canada to train athletes on match fixing. Those are the industries there. We want to participate, and we want to make sure that there is a strong national framework for betting integrity.
It was suggested, Paul, I think around the time C218 was passed, and then with the launching of the Ontario open market, that there was a match fixing scandal just around the corner. That hasn't happened, and I assume it's because of the due diligence that was done by the AGCO, and that it does require all of its operators to sign contracts with integrity monitors.
It does, and it's also that when you have 38 states in the U.S., you have Ontario has a very robust system. Alberta's been active in looking at sport integrity on what's being bet on. The real big part of this comes is that there are now enough people watching, and so with the incidents that have happened within NBA and NHL, those are athletes who had accounts, and those accounts are flagged because they're designated persons of interest because of what they do for a living. That shows the system works. That if people are going to make some foolish decisions in their lives about what they're doing around their livelihood and betting, then they're going to get found out. And that's part of that is and that from a professional athlete point of view, that's just, they should have some more common sense when they do these things. But for amateur athletes too, it's also a level of knowing that there's protection, because in cases, we've heard stories that, organized crime rings basically co-opting athletes into participating and not really letting them out. Threats and coercion and family threats and all of those things that have occurred and occur all over the world. You need to make sure there's protection for them, and that's part of where I think that there's a real opportunity in with Canadian, especially the high performance sports bodies, because the other side of this was early on is Canadian athletes go and play abroad,
Right.
participate in competitions abroad that are bet on abroad, and so it hasn't been just because the laws changed in Canada. It's the fact that this is a global occurrence, and protecting our athletes who travel abroad to participate. They need the training and exercise, and some are really good. The IIHF has a very good program they run at all their international tournaments, and they've been one of the early adopters, because like the IOC was a really big driver in betting integrity and creating policies and training, and they leaned on their having requirement many over a decade ago now, requiring all of their participating bodies to have betting integrity policies. And so this activity, this has been out and active, and there's a very strong ecosystem and really some great expertise in the space, because it's been happening since 2010 basically.
And we've also seen professional tennis has been very proactive with the ITIA, and it's probably one of the more progressive sports when it comes to monitoring and taking action against match fixing. Hey, I want to move on to I referenced the Osgood Hall certificate program a couple of weeks ago with Don and Don Bergeron, Harley Redlick, and you were on a panel with Amanda Brewer and Peter Ziglady, and we had a chance to talk a little bit about the third anniversary of Ontario. The Canadian Gaming Association had some messaging on Gaming News Canada around the third anniversary back on April 4th. I guess my question for you, Paul, is we're still waiting for iGaming Ontario to announce a successor to Martha Otten and the leadership role there. But kind of what are the stories, or what are the issues that you're kind of paying most close attention to, you and CGA members, as we're now 3 weeks into year 4 of the market?
There's there seems to be there's a lot of issues around that keeping an eye on. We're, as we've been quite active in participating in the consultation Finance Canada's had over the modernization of Canada's money laundering legislation, and it's woefully long overdue. But in that, there's challenges in the space still in terms of, and we try and working with FinTrack and Finance to make sure they understand where this industry and where it's going, and why the need for certain needs significant changes, we believe, especially when it comes to gaming, because the Act doesn't reflect the nature of the business. It took a national program and provincialized it. When you have national casino operators working because of provincial governments, the provincial conducted managers have become the reporting entities. Each province created their own model. So a casino operator like Great Canadian or Gateway operate in 3 or 4 provinces have 3 or 4 models. Well, that's a national piece of legislation with national regulations, and it's been provincialized. And it's like, that's ridiculous. We need to modernize this legislation, create more efficiencies, let the operators report direct, hold them. They're willing to be held accountable. That's the part. It's like, it's not like we're running from anything here. We want, good, smart regulation. and this is a way to get it, and embracing technology, because there's a frustration with Canada's anti-money laundering regime, and it needs updating, and it's built on a reporting transactions, where a lot of other jurisdictions in the world, they report on suspicious activities or behaviors, and so it's not just every transaction is reported. It's you're looking for suspicious activities, which leads to less reporting, but higher quality reporting, I guess, is the best way. More actionable items going in, where Canada is built on volume. It's quantity over quality, and that we don't think that necessarily is going to achieve the same objectives at the end of the day. So we're actively, looking for the new government in Canada to be able to make this a priority, because it's going to need to be. And that's one, and we're particularly playing for. Other things we're talking about these days is like, we're looking at costs of compliance for the industry. That in this obviously the trade war with the United States and the tariffs, and particularly the reciprocal tariffs that Canada has launched. The reciprocal tariffs are they launched them on slot machines and playing cards. Last time this was done in 2017, there was no slot machine on that list. It was just playing cards. I don't know what Nevada did in this, other than they voted for Donald Trump, but they elected a whole bunch of Democrats as their representatives. So it happened. It's unfortunate. It's impacted especially some of the medium and smaller slot machine manufacturers. Provincial procurement policies are changing. And what we're trying to do in all of this, and around this cost of compliance, is that maybe it's now time for provincial governments and regulatory agencies to start working together even more, because they do work together. I won't say that they're not. They are. And they've done some very good things, especially around licensing and registration of companies. But when it comes to other parts of the gaming regulatory framework, maybe it's now time for everybody to start working together. If we can find a better framework to harmonization of technical and other regulatory standards and policies, and removing policies that are just really not reflective of today's business environment, let's make it better and more affordable for people to do business here. I think that benefits everyone. That's something we want to talk more about with provincial governments, to be able to say that those regulatory rules matter. There's a cost behind them to comply. If we can find more harmonization, the products we deliver are the same virtually in every jurisdiction. So it's not much difference, but at times there's big differences between jurisdictions in a lot of their policies. And so that's a real focus for us right now. How can we, it's a case of, can we make lemonade from lemons in this exercise a bit? It's unfortunate what's occurred. And it's, with provincial governments making the decisions they've made on their procurement, it has provided some impact, and we hope, over time we'll see some of this dissipate, and we can get back to a more open and friendly trade relationship between our two countries. But Canada's made the decisions, and now it's finding how can we work best. Where can we find positive out of all of this?
Paul, when iGo does announce its new leader, and I think it's when it was advertising for this job, Martha Otten's title was executive director. I think the provincial government has bumped that up to now a president CEO title. What your members with the CGA, like what would they like to see the new leadership? What should be the priority with that organization with regards to iGo?
Well, it's part of some of the projects that really everybody's anxious to see the outcome of are underway. Increased use of automation and a broader data strategy, I think, is something that the agency initiated last year,
Right.
after the second anniversary. So when you saw a movement on, more automation when it comes to data reporting, will come a better. Unfortunately, they have to make changes on the AML side reporting, because the FinTrack portal outage of last year, which have put most of it out, has left a significant backlog. But it's also turned out the portal that's now up and running is less efficient, less user friendly than the previous one was. So the situation at Fintrack's cyber hack and subsequent response has been lacking in some places and needs better attention to what they're putting up. But at the same time, IGO and their staff and operators have responded and doing their best. But the lack of data is one that I know that it's underway and the work's being done to improve that. But they're going to still be a reporting entity for the next year or so, at least, if not more. So it needs to be done from an AML point of view. It needs to be done for data transfer, from uploading data reports, but also just understanding that that there is in engaging. What we're looking for is engagement to say, what can we improve upon? We've had it. Well, there's the contract that operators signed in 2022 is for 5 years. So in 2027, there's an opportunity for a new contract. And so with that, as you start to prepare for that, looking at what has worked, what hasn't, what can we improve upon, and better coordination again on with agencies in terms of requesting information, and how it's prepared and done, so that there's if AGCO and IGO are asking for similar data, maybe they can be done in the same format and at the same time. and there's less repetitiveness in some of the provisions or duplication. It's just, and I think there's a willingness on all sides to do this. And so with the new leadership coming, I think that it's just a matter of, getting up to speed and understanding what's required. But, I see it as they're a bit of an advocate for the industry within the government of Ontario. At the same time, they're an overseer in preserving and making sure the market's working. And well, it's demonstrated it has quite clearly. And it's created a robust competitive market that's benefited consumers. And so I think that we're, let's embrace that and just to say, how can we make it work even better?
Just want to pick your brain on what you're hearing about Alberta. I think we haven't talked since the provincial government in Alberta stepped up with the iGaming Alberta Act. I think there's been two readings now. The opposing parties believe that there's not enough. I guess there's not enough detail in the act that's been proposed. Just what kind of conversations are you having with people in the industry, and just your thoughts about the act and where things stand right now there?
Yeah, the Act Bill 48 is second reading in the Alberta legislature. This step was obviously made clear that the framework that a province of Alberta wants to use as AGLC as the regulator, and creating, which most of the legislation is about, creating a new agency to be the conduct and manage entity within the province. And people that complain there's not enough detail. Well, you don't want regulations in the act. You want to be able to, because you can change them easier when you don't have to open a piece of legislation to do it. And that's what most good legislation is built. So they're heading down the right path, and there will be lots of detail in time. This isn't, and it will be created by the government, approved by cabinet, and through the necessary. But AGLC has the ability to, it helps them now create regulations in the iGaming space and register, the ability to register operators and and suppliers and do those things. So now it's the next steps is they're planning to do some rounds of consultation with the industry as they roll out their plans. And we've said to them, listen, we're happy to help facilitate those discussions, because online gaming operators, for particular, you can't just talk to one person and cover every topic in the operating world. There's compliance people, there's the AML specialists, there's those that deal with betting and compliance regulation, and and on, and you have to kind of work through the process. So you learn what the best practices are. Obviously, there's a great guide in the province of Ontario's regulatory framework. Again, we've encouraged them to say, and the minister seemed to embrace that, from that point of view, we've said, if you're looking to make sure that you can have interest from a wide range of operators in the 50 plus companies that are in Ontario. The more the regulatory structure is similar, the better. Technical standards, particularly, because it's just the testing and reformatting product and all the rest of the stuff. It costs time and money to do those things. And some say maybe I won't enter that market. It's a market of around 5 million people, where Ontario's 15. So there's a different dynamic of whether everybody would choose to enter or not. So I think they're heading off on the right path. And, our mantra and all this has been, let's work to get it right. We don't have to worry about being quick. It's about getting it right. And so that's one of the things why we're encouraged by their willingness and their commitment to the more consultation as they start to build this out. So, the next year will be busy with that front, and they've got a lot of work to do as they stand up a new agency and develop the policies and regulations between AGLC and the new entity.
I just want to clarify, and I guess, maybe I'm asking a stupid question, but I'm thinking maybe our audience might be interested in this. And that's when the Ontario market was created, OLG, they were operators made it clear that they didn't want OLG to be involved in the online gaming on the regulatory or conduct and manage side. AGLC is involved in this side. So I'm hoping I'm asking the right question. Like, are there any concerns and all from operators about AGLC's role in this, or the fact that there is an iGaming Ontario type body being created? Does that eliminate that worry?
It does. And really what goes back to is it was the structure in Alberta. So Alberta, AGLC as an entity oversees the casinos, VLT network. They purchase slot machines for the casinos in Alberta. They run that VLT network. And then there's the regulatory side. And having worked with them, I know that there was always a great barrier between the two. Dave Barry, who heads the regulatory side, has got a lot of autonomy within his organization as he protects it. He's the registrar and protects the integrity of betting and gaming in Alberta. It was the issue in Ontario is that ultimately with OLG, it was my competitor is my overseer because they're offering a product in the same market. And that's where the conduct and manage needed to change and that's the same with AGLC because of the operating side of that business runs Play Alberta.
Right.
And so with moving the conduct and manage to a separate entity, you satisfy those concerns.
Okay.
And, there was always, with Alberta, there's always been a strong siloed approach to the regulatory side inside that agency because they regulate alcohol and cannabis, which they also distribute those two products. They don't have a B2C relationship on those two products, but they do have a B2B relationship. So gaming is a bit different inside of AGLC because of the B2C component that they have. But I think that it more than satisfies the way they've structured this. And I think operators should take comfort in the fact that there is that commitment, especially with the creation of the new agency that will be the conduct and manager and have the commercial relationship with operators will be entirely separate.
Okay, so it wasn't a dumb question.
No. It's the peculiarities of Canadian gaming law regulation and how provincial governments chose to interpret the criminal code. So everybody's a little bit different.
Hey, before we let you go, we're less than 2 months away from the Canadian Gaming Summit, which is stunning to me. There's a discovery conference that the Responsible Gambling Council puts on that's just around the corner in May. SBC America Summit happens in May as well down in Fort Lauderdale. But anything you want to tease with the Canadian Gaming Summit this year? I know SBC's running it. Obviously, the Canadian Gaming Association has input into the conference, the agenda, and is there any major changes that you want to highlight for this one in June?
No, I think it's there is a great program taking shape. Obviously, it's always been able to produce pretty strong content, and we're grateful that the SBC team is leaning in, and that's happening again. And I think with this I mean, the programs are more condensed in type, where the player protection is being integrated into the full program over the 2 days. So it's not a separate afternoon, which it's been. It's in part of the full program. But no, we're still expecting a strong turnout. 3,500 ish or more, and always a nice time to visit. When hopefully spring will have arrived in Canada by the time June comes. But yeah, it's shaping up to be another great event, and we're looking forward to obviously seeing a great chance for us to see a lot of our members face to face, and a chance to get together with the industry and talk about not only our successes but our challenges and the opportunities ahead. And we're going to take full opportunity to do that. So, no, looking forward to another great summit. But no, the program's shaping up to be terrific, and looking forward to bring everybody back together again.
Yeah, and we'll make sure we include in the Substack post with the podcast the link to the Canadian Gaming Summit website and information to register for tickets as well. That's Paul Burns, the president and CEO of the Canadian Gaming Association. Paul, always great to have you on the podcast. We will not wait another 3 months to do this. And in fact, maybe we'll do something live when we get together in June at the Canadian Gaming Summit.
That would be great. Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it.
That's it for this episode of the Gaming News Canada show. As always, you can find us at gamingnewscanada.ca and also on Substack and the various podcast platforms. Also on our Gaming News Canada YouTube channel. Again, thanks to Paul Burns for joining us today, and we will see everybody again very soon.